Something changes long before he can explain it. Not in your words, not in your gestures, but in the way you occupy yourself. There is a quiet moment when a woman stops leaning forward emotionally and instead settles into her own center. She doesn't withdraw in bitterness. She doesn't harden. She doesn't perform distance. She simply stops chasing resonance. And this is where everything begins to reorganize. You may not even notice it at first, but he does. Because a man is deeply sensitive to where a woman places her emotional weight. When your energy is no longer stretched toward him, when it is grounded within you, something ancient awakens in him. Attention sharpens. Curiosity returns. Presence intensifies. As Carl Jung said, what you resist persists, but what you withdraw energy from transforms. And this is the heart of it. For a long time, you may have believed that engagement is created through effort, more explanation, more availability, more emotional openness. But the psyche does not work that way. The unconscious responds not to pursuit, but to contained depth. When you stop managing the emotional field for both of you, when you stop smoothing silences, interpreting moods, anticipating needs, a subtle vacuum forms. Not an absence born of punishment, but a space born of self-respect. And into that space, a man instinctively leans. Because now, he feels something he didn't before. Your attention is no longer guaranteed. This does not frighten him, it activates him. A woman who is emotionally anchored in herself becomes a living question. Not because she withholds affection, but because she no longer offers it prematurely. Her presence feels earned, not automatic. And this awakens a man's instinct to show up rather than coast. In Jung's view, the masculine is oriented toward movement when confronted with something meaningful but not fully accessible. When your emotional stance shifts from available by default to present by choice, his behavior adjusts without a single conversation. He listens more closely. He notices subtleties. He stays mentally engaged even in your absence. Not because you demanded it, but because your inner world stopped orbiting him. This is the first truth many women are never taught. A man becomes attentive not when you give more, but when you stand more fully in yourself. And this is only the beginning. There is a point where a woman realizes that constantly checking the emotional temperature of a connection is exhausting. She notices how often she has adjusted herself, her tone, her timing, her expectations, just to keep the connection alive. And quietly, without drama, she stops. This moment is not loud. It does not announce itself, but it is seismic. Because the moment you stop monitoring whether he is pulling away, responding fast enough, or staying emotionally aligned, he begins to feel responsible for the connection for the first time. A man becomes attentive when he senses that the emotional labor has shifted back where it belongs. As Carl Jung observed, the psyche matures when it is no longer rescued from its own responsibility. And many men unconsciously drift when a woman unconsciously carries the emotional weight for both of them. She fills gaps before they are felt. She explains before confusion arises. She reassures before uncertainty can do its work. When you stop doing this, something crucial happens. He begins to feel the distance his absence creates. Not as punishment, but as consequence. Your silence becomes different now. It is no longer anxious. It is no longer waiting. It is full, and fullness is magnetic. A woman grounded in herself does not chase clarity. She allows it to reveal itself. She does not rush to define the connection. She watches how it unfolds. She does not fear pauses. She understands that pauses reveal intention. This is where his attention sharpens. He starts checking in, not because you demanded reassurance, but because he senses he could lose access to your inner world. He leans in, not because you withdrew affection, but because your affection is no longer automatic. In Jung's view, desire is born where polarity exists. When you reclaim your emotional center, polarity returns. You are no longer emotionally merged. You are distinct. And distinction awakens pursuit. This is why he starts asking more questions. Why he becomes more present when he is with you. Why he thinks about you when you are not there. Because now, he feels that your presence is chosen, not guaranteed. And a man always becomes more attentive to what he might have to earn. This is not strategy. It is alignment. And in the next part, you'll see why this shift makes him stay, not out of fear of loss, but out of genuine engagement. There is a subtle but decisive moment when a woman realizes that emotional generosity, without discernment, slowly erodes attraction. Not because she gave too much love, but because she gave it without requiring presence in return. When you shift your emotional stance, something fundamental changes in him. He no longer feels emotionally carried. He feels emotionally invited. An invitation is powerful. A woman who no longer overgives does not become distant. She becomes selective. Her warmth remains, but it is no longer endlessly available. Her care remains, but it is no longer unconditional. And this recalibration quietly tells his nervous system, I must participate to remain connected. As Carl Jung said, where love rules, there is no will to power, and where power predominates, their love is lacking. When you stop compensating, power dynamics dissolve, and genuine connection becomes possible. A man stays engaged when he feels needed but not relied upon. When your happiness does not depend on his validation, yet your openness responds to his consistency. This balance activates his maturity. He no longer feels pressured to perform. He feels inspired to show up. This is why his effort becomes steadier, why his attention stops oscillating, why he remains emotionally present even when life distracts him. Because now, your emotional world is not something he can casually step in and out of. It has form, it has rhythm, it has standards, and standards do something remarkable. They filter without confrontation. Men who are emotionally available lean closer. Men who were coasting feel uncomfortable and either rise or retreat. You no longer have to decide who stays. Your emotional stance does it for you. In Jung's view, relationships endure when both individuals are whole enough to meet without fusion. When you stop dissolving yourself for connection, intimacy deepens. You are no longer seeking completion, you are offering resonance. And resonance is what makes him stay. Not because he fears losing you, but because being with you feels alive, grounded, and real. In the next part, we will explore why this stance makes him emotionally invest, not just remain present, but bond. There is a moment when a woman stops trying to be understood and simply allows herself to be experienced. This is where emotional investment begins. For a long time, you may have believed that connection deepens through explanation, through clarity, through showing your intentions again and again. But the unconscious does not bond through logic. It bonds through felt contrast. When you stop proving your worth, a man begins to sense it. Because proving creates a subtle imbalance. It places you in the position of persuading, while placing him in the position of evaluating. And no real emotional bond can grow where one person is auditioning for connection. The shift happens when you no longer seek confirmation that you matter. As Carl Jung said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And when you begin to live from that place, your energy changes. You are no longer reaching outward. You are standing inwardly complete. This is when a man starts to invest emotionally. Not because you became harder, but because you became real. He feels that your affection is not a reaction to his attention. It is a response to his consistency. He senses that emotional closeness with you requires presence, not charm. And this quietly challenges him to show up as himself, not as a version designed to impress. A woman who no longer over-explains creates emotional gravity. She lets moments breathe. She lets actions speak. She allows him to wonder, not out of insecurity, but out of genuine interest. And curiosity is the doorway to bonding. He begins to share more. To open parts of himself he usually guards. To linger emotionally instead of retreating when things deepen. Because now, the connection no longer feels one-sided or performative. It feels mutual, alive, earned. In Jung's view, true intimacy emerges when two individuals meet without masks. When you stop explaining yourself into being chosen, you give him permission to step forward authentically or step away honestly. And men who are capable of depth choose to stay. In the next part, you'll understand why this emotional stance not only keeps his attention, but reshapes how he values you. There is a quiet maturity that forms when a woman no longer demands immediate emotional certainty. She no longer needs to know where this is going in order to remain grounded in herself. She no longer presses for definitions to calm her nervous system. She allows time to reveal truth. And this is where a man's perception of her changes profoundly. Because when you stop chasing certainty, you stop negotiating your value. A woman who is at peace with not knowing sends a powerful, unspoken signal. I trust myself more than I fear uncertainty. That trust changes everything. As Carl Jung noted, anxiety arises when the ego tries to control what only the psyche can unfold in time. When you release that control, your energy softens, but it also stabilizes. You are no longer emotionally reactive. You are responsive, and men feel this immediately. He begins to experience you not as someone who needs reassurance, but as someone whose presence is steady. Your calm does not pressure him to decide faster. It invites him to decide more honestly. This is when he starts to value you differently. Because value is not created by urgency. It is created by self-containment. When you no longer ask questions to soothe fear, your questions, when they do arise, carry weight. When you no longer seek validation through consistency checks, his consistency becomes meaningful rather than performative. He senses that you are not waiting to be chosen. You are observing. And observation is powerful. A woman who can remain open without clinging becomes rare. She does not collapse into hope, nor harden into detachment. She stays present, alert, warm, discerning. In Jung's view, this is individuation in relationship, remaining oneself while allowing connection to form. And it is precisely this stance that makes a man slow down, reflect, and deepen. He begins to imagine a future not because you pushed him there, but because being with you feels stable enough to consider one. In the next part, you'll see how this emotional stance transforms not just how he behaves, but how he respects you at a core level. There is a shift that happens when a woman no longer reshapes herself to preserve harmony. She stops adjusting her needs, her pace, her emotional depth just to avoid discomfort. She doesn't become rigid, she becomes rooted. And this is where respect is born. Because a man does not truly respect what bends endlessly to accommodate him. He may enjoy it. He may feel comfortable in it. But respect arises when he encounters a woman who remains herself even when it would be easier not to. When you stop adapting yourself to keep connection smooth, something in him recalibrates. He senses that your presence is not flexible to convenience. That being close to you requires awareness. As Carl Jung said, the strongest among us are those who are willing to stand alone. And paradoxically, this willingness creates deeper union. A woman who does not abandon herself to be loved becomes a psychological equal. She does not negotiate her emotional truth. She does not soften her boundaries to be more agreeable. And this quiet firmness sends a powerful message. I am not here to be managed. I am here to be met. This is when his respect deepens. He begins to consider his words more carefully. He becomes more intentional with his actions. He senses that careless behavior will cost him access to you, not because you threaten, but because your inner alignment makes inconsistency visible. In Jung's view, respect emerges when projection collapses. When a man can no longer project fantasies onto a woman who is anchored in herself, he must see her as she is. And seeing clearly is the foundation of respect. You stop being an emotional surface he reacts to, and become a presence he must respond to. This is why he listens differently now. Why he pauses before taking you for granted. Why he feels your absence more sharply than your accommodation. Because a woman who remains herself cannot be replaced easily. And in the next part, you'll understand why this respect transforms into commitment, not through pressure, but through inner alignment. There is a quiet irony in emotional connection. The moment a woman stops steering the relationship toward a destination, it finally begins to move on its own. When you no longer hint, suggest, or emotionally lean toward commitment, something essential shifts inside him. He is no longer responding to pressure. He is responding to truth. Because commitment cannot be extracted, it must arise. A woman who is anchored in herself does not wait in suspense. She lives. She expands. She continues choosing herself even while she is open to connection. And this creates a powerful inner contrast for a man. He is invited into her life, but he is not its center. As Carl Jung said, where wisdom reigns, there is no conflict between thinking and feeling. Your emotional stance becomes integrated. You are no longer pulled by fear of loss or desire for control. You are simply present. This presence removes his escape routes. He can no longer attribute hesitation to bad timing or emotional confusion. Your steadiness reflects his own readiness back to him. And in that mirror, he must decide. Men commit when avoidance becomes uncomfortable, not because they are cornered, but because they are confronted with clarity. You are no longer waiting for him to choose you. You are already chosen by yourself. This is when he begins to envision continuity, not out of obligation, but because the connection feels grounded, dignified, and emotionally clean. There is no chaos to manage, no reassurance to supply, no performance to maintain, just presence. In Jung's view, commitment is the ego's agreement to serve something meaningful. When your emotional stance is coherent and whole, you become meaningful without asking to be. And a man does not walk away from meaning easily. In the next part, you'll discover why this final shift makes the connection not only stable, but deeply bonding at the unconscious level. There is a profound shift that occurs when a woman no longer rushes to fill silence. She doesn't explain pauses. She doesn't soften discomfort. She doesn't rescue moments of emotional uncertainty. She lets space exist, and space is where bonding is born. For a long time, you may have believed that closeness is created by constant exchange, messages, reassurance, emotional presence without interruption. But the unconscious bonds not through saturation, but through meaningful absence. When you stop filling the emotional space, a man finally enters it. As Carl Jung said, the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. But reaction requires space. Without it, nothing changes, it only circulates. A woman who allows emotional pauses does not disconnect, she deepens the field. She gives his psyche room to respond rather than react. And this is where attachment shifts from surface-level engagement to inner bonding. He starts thinking about you in the quiet. He processes interactions after they happen. He feels you internally, not just when you are present. This is crucial, because bonding does not happen when you are always there. It happens when your presence lingers. When you stop narrating the connection, he begins to experience it. When you stop anticipating emotional needs, he begins to feel his own. And for the first time, he associates you not with effort, but with depth. In Jung's view, the unconscious forms attachment through symbols, memory, and emotional imprint. When you leave space, you become a symbol rather than a stimulus. And symbols are powerful. This is why he starts reaching out differently now, with more intention, with more emotional weight, with more sincerity, because something has rooted itself inside him. In the next part, you'll understand why this bond makes you unforgettable, not because you tried to be, but because you finally allowed him to feel. There is a moment when a woman releases the quiet urge to be unforgettable. She no longer tries to stand out. She no longer competes with absence, novelty, or attention. She simply is. And this is precisely when she becomes irreplaceable. Because what can be replaced is a function, attention, care, availability, emotional labor. But what cannot be replaced is a presence that has shape. A woman who lives from her center leaves an imprint, not a performance. When you stop trying to secure your place in his life, something unexpected happens inside him. He realizes that your energy is not interchangeable, not because it was intense, but because it was integrated. As Carl Jung said, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. But when a man encounters a woman who is at peace with hers, avoidance no longer works. He begins to compare, not consciously, but internally. Other connections feel loud, scattered, emotionally thin, because they lack what you offered without effort, coherence. You didn't rush him. You didn't cling. You didn't mold yourself to fit his uncertainty. And that absence of distortion becomes unforgettable. This is why he remembers you in moments of stillness. Why your presence feels heavier in memory than many others feel in reality. Because you were not trying to be chosen. You were choosing yourself and inviting him into that world. A woman who does not abandon herself creates a psychic signature. She becomes associated with calm, depth, truth. And those associations do not fade easily. In Jung's view, the psyche remembers what helped it grow. And being with you required growth, not through pressure, but through contrast. You did not ask him to become more. You showed him what more felt like. And once a man has felt that, replacements lose their appeal. In the final part, we will close this journey, and you will understand why this emotional stance ultimately brings you back to yourself, regardless of who stays. At the end of this journey, something becomes clear, perhaps for the first time without illusion. This emotional stance was never about him. Not about holding his attention. Not about keeping him engaged. Not even about making him stay. It was always about coming home to yourself. When a woman stops abandoning her inner truth for connection, the entire emotional landscape reorganizes. She no longer builds herself around response. She no longer measures her worth by consistency, effort, or choice from another. She becomes whole, and wholeness is the deepest form of power. As Carl Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. And this is the moment you wake up from that fate. You realize that the attention he gives you is not something you must earn. It is something that naturally arises when you are no longer fragmented inside yourself. When your emotions are aligned. When your presence is calm. When your boundaries are lived, not explained. Some men will lean in. Some will rise. Some will fall away. And for the first time, none of this destabilizes you. Because you are no longer using connection to complete yourself. This is the paradox few talk about. When you stop centering men emotionally, men who are capable of depth feel drawn closer, and men who are feeding on your overgiving quietly disappear. Both outcomes are victories. You are no longer fighting for engagement. You are no longer managing interest. You are no longer afraid of silence. You are available, but not empty. Open, but not unguarded. Warm, but not self-erasing. And whether he stays or leaves, something irreversible has happened. You have reclaimed your emotional authority. That is why he becomes more attentive. That is why he stays engaged. And that is why, in the end, you no longer need either outcome to feel complete. Because the deepest connection you were always seeking was never with him. It was with yourself.